In the forgotten folds of the mountains, where even the wind forgets to speak, there lies a village untouched by time, a place where the dead are never truly buried, and the living walk carefully so as not to wake them. Every family bears a curse, every oath is written in blood, and at the center of it all stands a tree that cries, the Mourning Soul Tree. Its roots feed on silence, its branches cradle names that no one dares to speak, and its bark bleeds whenever the past is disturbed. For generations, one daughter from each bloodline has been offered, buried beneath the roots to keep the curse asleep. But what happens when the next offering refuses? When a daughter returns not to bow, but to unearth what should have remained sealed? Tonight, you will hear the story of betrayal, ritual, and the blood that binds. This is not just folklore. This is inheritance. Welcome to the Mourning Soul Tree. Once you enter the fog, you do not leave alone. The fog had no beginning, no edge, no welcome. Lu Yunling stared through the window of the rickety bus as it curved along the narrow mountain road, her reflection trembling in the glass. The outside world was a blur of white mist and cold stone, swallowed by the kind of silence that pressed against the skin, the kind of silence that remembered. She had not returned to Guigu, Ghost Valley, in over 20 years. The last time, she had been a child with scraped knees and silent parents. Now she came as a woman with a coffin waiting. Her mother, Lu Meifeng, had died 2 nights ago. Heart failure, they said, but Yunling had heard the tone in the village elder's voice when he called, brittle, expectant, like a ritual had just reawakened. The bus stopped without a sound. No one else got off. Fog curled around her ankles as she stepped down. The driver gave no glance, and the bus hissed back to life, vanishing into the white like it had never existed. Before her lay the winding stone path, lined with moss-covered statues, hooded figures with empty faces, worn down by time and rain. The gate ahead still bore the crimson characters painted long ago. Jingzu Wu Ni. Honor the ancestors, disobey not. He passed beneath the gate, and the air changed. The silence was thicker here. Even the birds did not sing. The village looked much the same. Wooden houses with sagging roofs, strings of old prayer talismans fluttering in the mist. But something deeper had shifted, like the land itself was holding its breath. They were waiting. Faces peered from behind paper screens. Shadows moved behind fogged glass. No one approached. No one smiled. Yet Yunling felt eyes on her, dozens of them, each one knowing more than she did. She found her childhood home at the end of a stone-paved lane, tucked beneath the reach of the tallest tree she had ever known, black-barked, knotted, and silent, the Mourning Soul Tree. Its presence was a wound in the sky. Its roots crawled over the earth like veins reaching toward the house as if longing to claim it. Yunling looked away. The front door creaked open before she knocked. Standing inside was Auntie Rong, her mother's cousin, older now but unchanged in the eyes, those soft black beads that always looked like they were watching more than the surface. Yunling, Auntie Rong said, stepping aside. "You came." "I had to. She's still my mother." They said little else. Inside, the house smelled of camphor and dried herbs. The air was thick with incense, though none burned. Everything had been kept, preserved, as if Lu Meifong might walk in at any moment. Her shoes were by the door. Her teacup still rested on the wooden table. And in the center of the main room, a low altar draped in crimson cloth. Above it, the funeral portrait. Yunling's breath caught. Her mother's face stared back at her, stern, unreadable, as always, but her eyes seemed darker in death, hollowed. And the smile, there was something wrong with the smile. It was faint, yes, polite, but not the smile her mother wore in life. The room darkened slightly, as if the air had thickened. Yunling blinked. The smile was gone. She turned to Auntie Rong. "When is the funeral?" "Tonight, at dusk." The woman's voice was quiet. "The elders have prepared the rites. I won't be participating in any of that. It's your bloodline, your responsibility." "I don't believe in that." Silence fell like ash. "You don't have to believe," Auntie Rong said finally. "You only have to obey." Dusk came quickly in Ghost Valley. The sky turned bruised gray. The fog thickened, as if rising to kneel before the Mourning Soul Tree. Candles were lit along the paths, dim, flickering flames in glass bowls of water, floating like souls trying to find their way home. Yunling stood apart from the others as the villagers gathered before the tree. All wore white robes, tied with red silk at the throat. They held thin sticks of incense, but none were lit. An old man, Elder Hu, the ritual keeper, stepped forward, face hidden behind a rice paper mask marked with red thread sewn in a circle where the mouth should be. He chanted, low, ancient, a dialect even Yunling didn't recognize. It sounded more like the wind moving through bone. Auntie Rong approached her, offering a robe. "No, you must wear white. I came to bury my mother, not perform a superstition." "Then you risk waking what sleeps beneath her." The villagers turned their heads toward her in unison, as if guided by a string. Dozens of eyes, not accusing, not afraid, just waiting. Later that night, Yunling could not sleep. She sat in her childhood bedroom, now empty and cold. The walls bore no photos, only a single calligraphy scroll remained, hanging crooked. "Shui bu gan, hun bu mian." The blood never dries, the soul never rests. She tried to ignore it. The air felt thick, too still. Then something stirred, a whisper, faint. She turned. Her mother's portrait, propped on the altar in the next room, was facing her. The eyes in the photo were staring directly into hers, despite the angle. And there, again, was that smile. Her heart pounded. She stood, walked slowly to the altar, and turned the photo slightly to face away. But when she looked back, it had turned again. At 3:07 a.m., she awoke gasping from a dream she could not remember. Soil in her fingernails. A woman wrapped in red silk, bound in roots, screaming without sound. Outside, the wind began to hum, not whistle, not howl, hum, as if voices were buried in the fog just beneath the surface. And then she heard it. from beneath the floorboards. Drip, drip, drip. She crouched. From the cracks in the old wood, something dark and red seeped up, thick and slow, like syrup. Blood? She backed away. The room spun. Then, a breath, warm and unnatural, brushed her back of the neck. She turned. No one. Only the cold presence of the Mourning Soul Tree, visible through the cracked window, its branches twitching ever so slightly, though there was no wind. That morning, she asked Auntie Rong one final time, "What was this oath my mother made?" Auntie Rong said nothing at first. Then she placed a wooden box on the table. Carved into the lid were symbols Yunling did not recognize, and a name she did, Lu Mei Fong. Inside was a scroll, stained with blood, and a list of names written in red ink. At the bottom, Lu Yunling. Every 50 years, Auntie Rong said, the tree must be fed, the daughter must return. It is not punishment, it is preservation. Preservation of what? The dead, she whispered, and the silence. The fog never lifted. Not in the morning, not at noon, not even beneath the sun. Lu Yunling stood by the threshold of the house, staring out at the Mourning Soul Tree. Its branches were motionless in the still air, and yet something about it felt alive, as if it breathed when no one looked. The villagers had already gathered before dawn, dressed again in their white robes, heads bowed before the base of the tree. Yunling watched from the shadows of the corridor. The ritual continued, slow, rhythmic, wordless. No one ever explained it. No one ever stopped. They simply obeyed. And the tree stood above them like a silent god. At the base of the tree, there was something new. A wooden bowl, shallow, carved from the same dark wood as the tree, had been placed at its roots. Yunling watched as Elder Hu stepped forward, took a knife from his robe, and sliced a thin line across his palm. The blood ran freely, and he held it over the bowl until it dripped in thick, slow drops. One by one, others followed. Men, women, even a child. Blood into bowl, bowl into root. The tree's bark absorbed the offering like dry earth drinking rain. Yunling's stomach turned. She turned away, but not before she saw it. A tear of red, thick and glistening, trailing down the trunk like sap, but too dark, too thick. Not sap, blood. The Mourning Soul Tree was weeping. Later that morning, Auntie Rong spoke while preparing tea. "You saw it, didn't you?" Yunling didn't answer. "It weeps when an oath is broken," the old woman said, placing a single dried chrysanthemum into the cup. "It mourns betrayal, not for the sake of the dead, but for the sake of balance." "This is madness," Yunling muttered. "Why do you people let this thing control your lives?" "It does not control," Auntie Rong said gently. "It remembers." Yunling laughed, dry, exhausted. "Do you even hear yourself?" Auntie Rong didn't flinch. She placed the cup before her and said softly, "It wept the day your mother fled the valley. It wept the night she died. And it wept this morning because you are still here." That afternoon, Yunling wandered the village. Her footsteps echoed unnaturally on the stone paths, as if the sound didn't belong. Children didn't play. Dogs didn't bark. Even the crows avoided this place. She stopped by the shrine near the communal well. It was a small structure, built entirely of bone-colored wood, housing 3 ancestor tablets wrapped in red cloth. What disturbed her wasn't the shrine itself, but the figure crouching in front of it. A little girl, alone. Her dress was pale blue, but dirt-stained. Her hair was thick, knotted, falling over her face. She hummed to herself, a broken, tuneless melody. Then she looked up. Yunling froze. The girl's face was porcelain pale, and her eyes had no whites, only black. "Are you the daughter?" the girl asked. "What? The one who didn't kneel?" Yunling stepped back. "Where are your parents?" The girl stood. Her feet were bare, bleeding. Her skin shimmered like moonlight on still water. Then she smiled. The edges of her lips cracked with the motion. "You'll hear her soon," she whispered. "Who?" "The one under the tree." And with that, she vanished into the mist. That night, Yunling didn't sleep. She tried, but the dreams came. Or perhaps they weren't dreams. She was beneath the Mourning Soul Tree, the roots coiled around her ankles, slithering, pulling. The sky above was white, featureless. A woman stood before her, dressed in funeral silk, face hidden behind a red veil. Her voice was not a voice. It was soil in the mouth. It was silence shaped into words. "One is owed. The debt is awake. She was spared, so you must take her place." Yunling tried to scream, but her mouth was full of ash. Then the woman lifted the veil. No face, only a hollow cavity where the face should be. From it poured a river of blood that smelled like fire and sorrow. She woke choking. It was raining. Not water, but red. Yunling rushed to the window, breath still shaky, and froze. Outside, the Mourning Soul Tree was bleeding. Not dripping, bleeding. Thick red streams ran from its trunk, trailing across the ground in dark veins. The earth soaked it up hungrily. From her window, she could see the villagers standing in the downpour, unmoving, unbothered. Their heads tilted upward, eyes closed, mouths open, drinking it in, as if welcoming the tree's grief. She ran outside barefoot, screaming, "What is wrong with you?" Auntie Rong stood among them, her face wet with red. "It remembers," she said softly. Yunling grabbed her arm, trembling. "Remember what?" Auntie Rong looked at her then, eyes filled not with madness, but sorrow. "It remembers your mother. She was the last chosen. She ran. She left the tree hungry. It mourned her absence, and now it weeps for you." At dawn, Yunling sat on the porch, hair damp, fingers shaking. Her palms still bore red stains. She couldn't scrub it off. The rain had stopped. The tree had grown quiet. But the silence was not peace. It was warning. Something had been stirred, not by hatred, but by neglect. And as she stared at the black bark streaked in red, she knew this wasn't over. It was only beginning. The Mourning Soul Tree was not just mourning the past, it was calling the debt forward, and her blood was on the ledger. Blood dries, paper burns, but names endure. The morning after the tree wept, Yunling couldn't stop washing her hands. No matter how hard she scrubbed, the stains remained beneath her fingernails, a faint rust red like old ink. She barely spoke during breakfast. Auntie Rong moved silently around the kitchen, the usual clatter of pots and cups muted, as though sound itself feared to echo. The teacup before her had a small chip in its rim. Her mother always used this cup. She remembered her scolding Yunling for trying to throw it away. "Cracked things hold memory," she had said. "They bleed differently." Now it held chrysanthemum tea and silence. "I want answers," Yunling said finally. Auntie Rong didn't stop moving. "You won't like them. Try me." The old woman placed a cloth-wrapped bundle on the table. She untied it slowly, reverently. Inside lay a wooden box, lacquered black, bound shut with a red silk thread knotted 13 times. Yunling's hands hesitated. Auntie Rong spoke in a hush. "This is your mother's legacy, your bloodline's truth." Yunling undid the knots, one by one. Inside was a scroll, yellowed with age, stained with thumbprints, not of ink, but blood. At its center was a seal, cracked wax, etched with an ancient family crest, the shape of a tree with one eye at its root. She unrolled it. It was not just a scroll. It was a ledger. A list of names written in 2 columns, one for men, one for women. The male column was blank beyond the first few generations. The female side stretched on, unbroken. Each name had a date beside it, followed by a symbol. Most bore a simple red dot. A few had a line crossing through the name. One, only one, had black ink smeared across it, like someone had tried to erase it with violence. At the bottom, beneath the most recent date, Lu Meifeng, 1973, there was one final name written in faint crimson: Lu Junling. Her hands trembled. "What is this?" she whispered. "The record of offering," Auntie Rong replied. "Every daughter in our family, going back 7 generations. Those marked in red fulfilled the oath. The ones crossed out refused. The one in black," she paused, "ran." I swallowed. My mother. She was the chosen one. When the year came, she fled to the city, pregnant with you. She broke the blood pact. The Mourning Soul Tree remembers. And now it wants me. Auntie Rong nodded. The debt skipped 1 generation, but it cannot be erased. Yunling shook her head. "That's insane. This is just a list. Ink and paper. It's not fate." But the scroll felt warm in her hands. And somewhere beneath the floor, she swore she heard roots shifting. Later that day, Yunling took the ledger to the village archive, an old building at the edge of the village that no one seemed to visit. The door was unlocked, though it groaned like a thing in pain. Inside, dust ruled. Shelves leaned under the weight of time. Scrolls, tablets, carved stones. She lit a candle and made her way toward the back, where family records were stored in labeled drawers. She searched for her family, the Lu lineage. She found dozens, all carefully categorized: ritual logs, genealogy, funeral diagrams, handwritten accounts of blood rites, written with reverence and horror. One passage caught her eye. "In the 3rd year of the Wanli Emperor, a sickness spread among the valley. The fields died, the water soared. The ancestors demanded red silence. A daughter was buried beneath the sacred tree. The roots closed around her, and the plague ended. So began the offering. Yunling dropped the scroll, her breath fogged in the cold air. This wasn't just legend, this was tradition, codified, repeated, obeyed. She returned home in the late afternoon. The fog had thickened. The Mourning Soul Tree stood silent, but its trunk glistened slightly, as if still moist with grief. Children played nearby, tossing stones into its roots. One child sang softly, 1 for the blood, 2 for the name, 3 for the girl who never came. She backed away, heart pounding. That night, the dreams returned. She was walking through the village, but the village was wrong. The houses were older, built in the Ming style, clay tiles, red lanterns with real fire inside. The robes were dyed in ash and cinnabar. The fog was thicker. She approached the Mourning Soul Tree, but it was smaller, younger, and surrounded by chanting villagers. At its base, a girl knelt in white. Her eyes were wide with terror, her mouth sewn shut with red thread. Elder Hu stood above her, holding a black scroll and a knife carved of bone. Yunling tried to scream, but no sound came. Then the girl looked up at her. She had Yunling's face. She woke with dirt beneath her nails again, and blood on her pillow. No wound, just blood. By morning, Auntie Rong had prepared a red thread bracelet and tied it around Yunling's wrist. It will not stop the curse, but it may confuse the spirits. I'm not wearing a talisman, Yunling muttered. You already are, she replied. You were born with one, your blood. Outside, the Mourning Soul Tree loomed, and beneath its roots, something shifted. Not in dream, not in metaphor, but in truth. Something ancient was waking, and it remembered her name. The dead do not watch, unless their eyes are left open. The funeral took place beneath the Mourning Soul Tree. Auntie Rong had said it was tradition that all women of the Lu bloodline must be buried in the shadow of the tree, their ashes returned to the root that bore their name. But Yunling felt like she was being made to offer her mother, not mourn her. She stood to the side in black, refusing the white robe the others wore. The villagers circled the tree, heads bowed, humming low and breathless. In the center, resting on a black stone altar, lay the casket. Wooden, simple, closed. Until Elder Hu arrived. He moved without sound, a shadow in white, his face hidden behind the paper mask with no mouth. In his hands, he held a small curved blade and a long silk ribbon dyed red. Yunling stepped forward. What are you doing? Auntie Rong held her back gently. She must be prepared. For what? The spirit gate. If her eyes remain open, she will wander. Yunling felt a chill grip her spine. The casket was opened. Her mother lay still, hands folded in the ritual pose, face powdered to pale perfection. She wore a red shroud across her chest, the same shade as the silk Yunling now recognized from her dreams. But it was her eyes that stole the breath from her lungs. They were open. Not wide, just slightly. A sliver, but unmistakably open. Dark, dry, and watching. Elder Hu knelt. With the knife, he gently pressed the lid shut, not once, but 3 times. Then he took the red silk ribbon and with practiced motion bound her mother's head, sealing the eyes beneath. The chanting resumed, and Yunling could not move, because for just a moment, as the ribbon passed over her mother's face, she smiled. That night, Yunling refused to sleep in her childhood room. She couldn't bear it. Instead, she sat in the living room, staring at the old funeral portrait. They had replaced the one that kept turning on its own, but this one wasn't better. The smile was back, more pronounced now, the lips curled at the edges, faint but defiant, like a secret being kept under the skin. She turned it face down. But later that night, when she passed by again, it was upright, facing her. At 3:33 a.m., the sound of nails scratching wood pulled her from sleep. She sat up on the sofa, heart pounding. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It was coming from her mother's old bedroom. She stood. The hallway stretched long in the dark, the fog creeping through the half-open window, curling along the floor like something alive. She stepped toward the door. Her hand trembled as she reached for the handle. The door creaked open. The room was empty, but the mirror, the one above the old vanity table, was fogged from the inside. And across it, written in the mist, were 6 characters. 你应该闭上她的眼睛. You should have closed her eyes. The next morning, Yunling asked the villagers if the casket had been buried. Auntie Rong answered with a tight smile. Not yet. The tree must accept her first. What does that mean? She will rest once the roots stop bleeding. And if they don't? Auntie Rong said nothing, but Elder Hu, from across the courtyard, lifted his mask just slightly, and Yunling saw that his mouth had been sewn shut with red thread. Desperate for clarity, Yunling searched the back storage room, her mother's study, now covered in dust and paper talismans. At the bottom of a chest, beneath old robes and incense bundles, she found a box wrapped in silk. Inside, a journal bound in worn leather. Her mother's handwriting filled the pages. Neat, sharp strokes. She flipped through it quickly. Prayers, recipes, names, symbols. But near the end, a single entry caught her eye. The dreams return. She still calls from beneath the tree. I see her in the mirror, not as I was, but as I should have become. I never closed her eyes. I left her awake. Now she wants my daughter. Yunling dropped the journal. The window cracked open behind her. A cold wind swept through the room, and every paper talisman fluttered violently, every one of them turning inward, facing her. And somewhere, from deep beneath the floor, the sound of roots creaking, not growing, searching. That night, Yunling dreamed of the burial again. Only this time, it was her mother's voice whispering through the roots. You should have left. You are not meant to stay. The tree doesn't forget, and I was never forgiven. The moment you opened the casket, it saw you. She woke gasping, sitting upright on the floor, and found herself staring into the hallway mirror. Her reflection did not move. It stood still, head tilted, eyes open, and smiling. In Ghost Valley, light was never a comfort. Lanterns were not to guide the living, but to keep the dead from coming home. The Ghost Lantern Festival arrived in silence. There were no drums, no singing, no laughter of children running with sparklers, only fog, and the slow hiss of lantern wicks being lit, one by one, beneath a sky that had forgotten the sun. Yunling stood outside the house as the first lanterns were carried past. Each was made of delicate red paper, painted with black calligraphy. But they were all hung upside down, their fire flickering downward like bleeding flame. "What does it mean?" she asked. Auntie Rong stood beside her, dressed in mourning white. "It's an inversion, so the spirits walk past instead of in." "In where?" Auntie Rong didn't answer. The villagers wore masks again, rice paper stitched with red thread in the shape of closed mouths. Some bore lanterns. Others carried incense bowls filled with ashes and bones. All walked slowly toward the Mourning Soul Tree. Yunling followed, though no one acknowledged her. It felt less like a festival and more like a funeral with no corpse. At the base of the tree, a circle of fire had been drawn. Within it, a bowl of red liquid, a black scroll sealed in wax, and a dress made of funeral silk, tied at the sleeves with crimson ribbon. It looked exactly like the one from her dreams. Her breath caught. Elder Hu raised his hands. The procession stopped. He knelt and whispered to the tree, though no sound came. Then, with a rusted brush, he dipped into the red liquid and began to paint symbols across the roots. Every symbol resembled a name, and with each one, the air grew heavier, denser. Rong. Yunling turned to Auntie Rong. "Why do you do this?" Her aunt's voice was barely audible. "To keep her asleep." "Who?" "The first daughter." "The one who was buried alive?" Auntie Rong shook her head slowly. "No, the one who refused to die." The ritual continued long into the night. One by one, the villagers stepped forward to whisper into a bowl placed at the base of the tree. Yunling watched. None of them moved their mouths. They leaned close, and somehow the bowl steamed, as if exhaling memory. When it was her turn, no one said anything. Elder Hu simply pointed. "No," she said. He pointed again. She stepped back, and for the first time, the entire crowd turned to face her, simultaneously, silently, masks tilted, hands still. She ran. Back at the house, Yunling slammed the door shut and locked it. Her heart thundered. Outside, the fog seemed to pulse, beating like breath. She stumbled to the kitchen to splash water on her face. But when she looked up, the window no longer showed the courtyard. It showed the base of the Mourning Soul Tree, and in the center of its roots, standing motionless, was herself, wrapped in the funeral silk, eyes wide open, and the red lanterns behind her burned upside down. She screamed. The image vanished. Auntie Rong rushed in, holding a bowl of salt water and a brush. Without a word, she knelt and began painting symbols on the floorboards. "What are you doing?" Yunling demanded. "She's reaching through," the old woman whispered. "The first daughter. She smells blood that hasn't bowed." "This is madness. You all are mad." "Then leave," Auntie Rong snapped. "Get on the bus. Walk through the mist. But you won't find a road, not anymore." "Why?" "Because the festival has begun, and until the last lantern fades, you belong to the dead." That night, Yunling couldn't sleep. The house creaked in unfamiliar ways. The mirror in the hall was covered with cloth. The windows had been smeared with ash. She lay on the floor beneath the quilt of her mother's old robes. At 2:13 a.m., the bell rang. She hadn't heard a bell in years, but now it rang once, then twice, then 13 times, each chime deeper than the last. She rose and walked to the door, hand trembling. The bell hung at the front gate, rusted, motionless, but it had rung, and beneath it was a small object. She picked it up, a paper mask, red thread, mouth sewn shut. Inside, scribbled in ink, were 6 characters. Ni yi jing bei kan jian. You have already been seen. She dropped it, ran back inside, but on the wall above her mother's altar, something had changed. The funeral portrait was gone. In its place was a red lantern hung upside down. It flickered silently and cast a shadow that wasn't her own. The next morning, the village was empty, not abandoned, just quiet, as if something sacred had ended in the night or something monstrous had begun. She found Auntie Rong sweeping ash from the front step. She said, "The last lantern burned at dawn." Yunling asked, "So it's over?" Her aunt looked up, eyes hollow. "No." "What happens now?" A pause, then softly, "Now the tree chooses." The fog hides many things. Forgotten paths, buried names, and men who remember what should have been lost. The morning after the last lantern burned, Yunling left the house before the village stirred. She had heard whispers of the Bone Priest since childhood, a half-mythical man who lived deep in the ravine, past the edge of the rice fields, where the land cracked open and time no longer flowed straight. Her mother once warned her never to go there. "The wind forgets itself in that place," she'd said, "and so do people." But Yunlin needed truth, and warnings had never stopped her before. The path beyond the fields twisted like veins. Roots jutted through the dirt like ribs. Stones shifted underfoot. It felt less like a trail and more like a wound in the earth. By midday, she found the cave, an uneven slit between 2 ancient boulders, half covered by thorned vines. The air around it was colder, still, like even the insects didn't dare hum here. She hesitated only once, then entered. The passage sloped downward into shadow. Inside, the walls were carved with symbols, familiar now, names, dates, blood marks, all etched into stone. She passed bundles of bone tied with red thread. Masks hung like lanterns from the ceiling. Silence pressed in, heavy and ancient. And then, a voice. Dry, sandpaper on silk. "You carry her scent." Yunling turned. In the deepest chamber, seated on a mat of woven reeds, was an old man wrapped in funeral white. His eyes were milky and blind, but he was not helpless, not at all. "I've been waiting for the next one." "You're the Bone Priest?" Yunling asked. "I was, long ago. Now I am only the mouth left behind." "Tell me," she said, "tell me what this curse is." He gestured to the wall behind him. Carved there, larger than all the others, was a mural of a girl kneeling before the Mourning Soul Tree, her arms outstretched, her mouth stitched shut. Around her, villagers bowed low, blood pouring from their palms into the roots. "She was the first," he said. "She was not chosen, she was given." He told her the story. Centuries ago, during the late Ming Dynasty, a sickness fell over Ghost Valley. Crops blackened overnight, livestock drowned in dry pens, children were born silent, and the air buzzed with invisible flies. The elders searched for answers, prayed, fasted, burned incense until the sky turned to smoke. Then one night, the tree bled for the first time. The bark split open, roots churned, a voice echoed in the windless air. "Feed me silence, bury the disloyal." The people chose a girl, the daughter of the elder who first broke the village pact by hiding rice during the famine. She was wrapped in red silk, buried beneath the tree while still breathing, not as punishment, but as a bargain. "And it worked?" Yunling asked, heart pounding. The old man nodded. The sickness stopped, the water cleared, the rice returned, so they did it again and again. He reached behind him and retrieved a small scroll brittle with age. "These are the oaths, one every 50 years, one daughter, one burial, to keep the first girl asleep." Yunling's voice trembled. "And if no one is offered?" "She stirs," he whispered, "and when she stirs, others follow." "She was just a child. They buried her alive." "She became something else in the soil. Grief doesn't rot, it roots." Yunling sat in silence, the walls of the cave closing in around her. "She speaks to me," she said quietly, "in dreams, in mirrors." The bone priest tilted his head. "Then it is almost time." He handed her an object wrapped in silk. Inside, a comb made of bone, etched with her family crest, the tree with an eye at its root. This was hers, the first daughter. It took it from her hair before the burial. "Why are you giving it to me?" "She's chosen you. You bear the blood of the escaped. You are the unpaid debt." Yunling shook her head. "There has to be a way to stop this." "There is." Hope sparked in her chest, but the old man's next words doused it. "Die willingly." As she stood to leave, the bone priest touched her wrist. "One more thing," he said. "You must close your mother's eyes, truly, with salt and thread." You did not finish the ritual." "If I don't?" "She will return, but not to protect you." He leaned close, and though his eyes were blind, they pierced her. "She will come to drag you back to the roots herself." The sun had disappeared by the time Yunling emerged from the ravine. The wind was sharper now. The fog was thinner, but wrong, like stretched skin. The Mourning Soul Tree stood tall in the distance, a dark spear against the bleeding sky. And for the first time, Yunling noticed something she hadn't before. Its shadow no longer pointed toward the east. It pointed toward her. Some curses lie dormant, others grow. Yunling couldn't stop hearing it, a faint creaking, a distant whisper, a sound like roots shifting just beneath the floorboards. It followed her through the house, subtle at first, like the settling of old wood, but with each passing hour it grew louder, hungrier, and it always came from below. She returned to her mother's room, the bone comb from the bone priest still wrapped in silk in her hand. The mirror on the wall was now completely black, not reflective, but obsidian, as though it had been painted with shadow. On the floor, beneath the altar, the red funeral ribbon had come undone. She froze. The ribbon used to bind her mother's eyes was now curled like a serpent across the floorboards. No wind, no movement, but it had unwrapped itself. She leaned down, heart pounding, and reached toward it. The ribbon twitched. Yunling stumbled back, breath sharp, and turned toward the mirror again. Her mother's face was there, Not her own, not a memory, but her mother, standing just behind her reflection, eyes open, mouth closed tight as if to keep a scream locked inside. And then, without warning, she lifted her hand in the reflection. Yunling spun around. No one. But when she looked back, the mirror was clear, empty. That evening, she returned to the village archives. She needed proof, something, anything, that this wasn't just madness blooming in grief. She found a scroll labeled Disrupted Offerings. Inside, brief records of daughters who had refused the rite. One had fled, another took her own life before the ceremony, a third simply vanished. Each account ended with the same phrase: the roots stirred, the village bled, balance was taken. And then, beneath it, hastily scribbled, almost erased: their bloodlines ended, their names erased, their homes devoured by the tree. Yunling ran her fingers over the ink. The paper was still damp. She left the archives as dusk fell, and as she stepped into the mist, she saw them. Roots, dozens of them, snaking through the cracks in the stone paths, crawling up the walls of nearby houses, coiled like waiting fingers around the base of lantern poles. She followed one, the largest, as it pulsed beneath her feet. It led back to her mother's house, beneath the floor, beneath the altar. She dropped to her knees inside and pulled at the boards. They resisted at first, then gave way, and what lay beneath was not dirt. It was flesh. A layer of skin stitched together, pale and waxy, stretched over the earth like a burial shroud. Beneath it, something moved. Yunling gasped, falling backward. The boardwood snapped in her hand. The scent of blood filled the room, and from the open mirror across the hall came a whisper: "You were supposed to come willingly." That night, the villagers gathered in silence outside her door, not knocking, just standing. Dozens of white-robed figures holding lanterns upside down, their faces hidden by stitched masks. Yunling didn't open the door. She stared through the cracks in the shutters, watching as they stood motionless for over an hour, then turned and walked back toward the Mourning Soul Tree. Not one of them looked back. Auntie Rong came to her the next morning, holding a bowl of salt and red thread. "You must finish the ritual before your mother fully wakes." "She's dead." "Not entirely." Yunling backed away. "You expect me to sew her eyes shut again with thread and salt?" "Yes. I was my mother." "She broke the oath, and now she's a door." "A door?" Auntie Rong leaned close. "Some ghosts haunt, others open. She's not here to visit. She's here to let the buried through." That night, Yunling dreamed she was inside the Mourning Soul Tree. Not beneath it, inside. The roots wrapped around her limbs. The air was thick with whispers, not voices, but memories murmured through blood-soaked bark. She saw girls, dozens of them, bound in red silk, hair braided, mouths sewn, eyes wide in terror. One of them turned to her and smiled. It was her mother, but younger, before the world wore her down. She whispered, "It's better if you go willingly. It hurts less when you give yourself." Yunling screamed, but her mouth was filled with roots. She woke to find herself on the floor, right where the boards had broken open. The silk from the comb had unraveled. The ribbon lay across her chest, and the root beneath the floor. It had grown, pushing upward, cracking the wood, reaching like a finger toward her heart. She crawled back, breath catching, as the room began to shift, the walls pulsing, the air thick with the scent of rot and sorrow, and from under the earth a sound rose up. Not a scream, not a cry, a heartbeat. The curse was no longer a story. It was awake, and it was coming for her. Some oaths are spoken. Others are written in silence, sealed with blood. But the worst oaths are those that were never broken. Yunling sat at the family altar, knees drawn to her chest, staring into the cracked floorboards where the roots had risen. They'd stopped moving for now, but they pulsed, slow, rhythmic, like veins beneath the skin that wasn't hers. Auntie Rong had gone quiet again, lighting incense and placing salt in the corners of the room, but no ritual could change the truth that was finally, fully blooming in Yunling's mind. Her mother had lied to her for her whole life. That afternoon, Yunling returned to the journal she'd found in the chest. The final pages had been torn out, but tucked into the spine was something else, something brittle and stained. A letter, folded in half, sealed with the wax of the Liu family crest. She hesitated, then opened it. To my daughter, if you are reading this, then I am already gone, and the roots have begun to stir. I wish I could say I'm sorry, but I'm not sure I am. I ran because I was afraid, not of death, but of being forgotten, buried and silenced beneath that tree like all the others. I loved you more than I feared the curse. But the tree never forgets. It has waited, and now it remembers your name. The letter was unsigned, but the handwriting was her mother's. Precise, sharp, familiar. Yunling burned the letter in the incense bowl. It curled to ash silently, as if the paper had expected this ending. But even in flame, the words remained, branded behind her eyes. I loved you more than I feared the curse. Was that love, or was that cowardice? Was she now the price of her mother's defiance? Later, she wandered outside. The sky was gray again, but not with mist, with smoke. It drifted from the village center, thick plumes curling into the air, too dense to be cooking fires. She followed the scent and found the villagers burning names. Hundreds of slips of rice paper, each inscribed in red ink, were fed into a ceremonial brazier, one by one, name by name. She crept close and saw her family scroll, the ancestral ledger, resting nearby. The page had been opened to her name. She saw Elder Hu press his thumb to the ink beside it, and then raise the paper toward the flames. "Stop!" she shouted. The crowd turned, masks expressionless, silent. Yunling pushed past them and snatched the paper from the elder's hands. "My name is not yours to offer." Elder Hu stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he reached beneath his robe and pulled out another scroll, this one older, sealed in wax. He handed it to her, and for the first time she saw it clearly. The original pact, drawn in red, written not in characters, but symbols. roots, eyes, names without letters, blood drops in circles, and beside them, a handprint. Her mother's, stamped in red. She collapsed to her knees. "She signed it," she whispered. Auntie Wrong appeared behind her. "She fled the valley, yes, but before she did, she signed the renewal." "What does that mean?" "She made the promise to return, that when the time came, she'd send you, that she would give what was owed through you." "No, she didn't break the oath, child. She fulfilled it in the cruelest way possible." Yunling's vision blurred. Her mother hadn't escaped. She had made a deal. She returned home in silence. The house felt smaller now, the walls closer, the air thicker. The photos on the walls had all changed. Where there were smiling faces, there were now masks, and in every frame, her mother stood just slightly to the side, watching, judging, or warning. That night she dreamed of her mother again, only this time she wasn't buried. She was standing beneath the tree, wrapped in the same red silk that had haunted every nightmare. She held something in her hands, a bundle, small, quiet, a baby, Yunling. She laid it at the base of the Mourning Soul Tree and whispered, "Take her instead," and walked away. Yunling woke screaming. Auntie Wrong was already standing in the doorway. "She gave you away before you were even born," the old woman said softly. "You were promised. That's why the curse sleeps no longer." "I won't do it," Yunling said. "I won't give myself." "Then it will take you." "No!" Auntie Wrong stepped forward and placed a paper talisman on Yunling's chest. "You are the unbroken oath." Outside, the Mourning Soul Tree began to stir. Its branches groaned like old bones. The bark split open along one side, not violently, but surgically. And from within its hollow center, a breath escaped. A long, slow exhale, as if something beneath had just awakened. Not in rage, not in hunger, but in recognition. The girl it was promised had finally returned. The village did not speak. The tree did not move. But the soil had made up its mind. The morning was too quiet. Even the fog seemed afraid to stir. Yunling stepped outside, expecting to find mist-wrapped homes and smoldering incense. But the village had emptied overnight. No smoke, no footsteps, no birdsong. Only the tree. Always the tree. The Mourning Soul Tree stood taller than ever, its branches outstretched like arms preparing to receive. Its roots had spread into the center of the village, breaking through stone, splitting pathways, drinking from beneath homes. Auntie Wrong appeared behind her. "Today is the day," she said. Yunling didn't respond. "You already feel it, don't you? The heaviness in your breath, the slowness in your bones. It's not fear, it's the earth calling you back." Yunling returned to her room, but nothing felt like hers anymore. The photos on the wall had turned to ash. The journal had vanished. The mirror no longer reflected anything, only a red mist swirling behind the glass like breath from a mouth that didn't open. And on her bed, folded with care, was the funeral silk, the same robe worn by every daughter who came before. The fabric was soft, still warm, still damp, and next to it, the comb, no longer bone white, but darkened, stained, as though the memories of the buried had seeped into it. She reached for it. Her hand shook. That afternoon, the drums began, slow, hollow, not struck with sticks, but with palms, the way rituals used to be performed in the old dynasties. She stepped outside and saw them. The villagers had returned. Every one of them wore white robes with red sashes. Their masks had changed, now painted with the image of tree roots instead of closed mouths. They did not speak. They did not bow. They simply surrounded her. Elder Hu approached, holding a lacquered box. Inside, red thread, 3 silver needles, and a bowl of river mud. Yunling backed away. No! But they did not ask. Hands gripped her arms, dozens of them. She was lifted, not violently, but with the deliberate reverence of a sacrifice already claimed. She kicked, screamed, begged. The villagers didn't react. Only Auntie Rong whispered in her ear, "There is no hatred in this, only balance." They carried her through the mist-veiled village to the base of the Mourning Soul Tree. The altar had changed. Now it was a circle of roots pulled back like a mouth, revealing a pit lined with red soil and writhing tendrils. She was placed on a bed of bones, those of women, daughters, sisters, stacked neatly beneath the tree. Elder Hu raised the bone comb and placed it in her hand. Then the villagers began the binding hymn, a song with no melody, just breath. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Dozens of them, singing with lungs full of dust. The red silk was wrapped around her limbs. One by one, the needles pierced the orchid, anchoring the fabric to her skin. She felt each thread like a memory, a scream trapped in blood. They braided her hair with strands of hair that weren't hers, long, black, brittle. And then, the mud. It was smeared across her face, her chest, her stomach, and finally, her lips. Silence. The burial began. As she was lowered into the earth, Yunling tried to hold on to something. Anger, grief, rage. But it slipped away. All that remained was weight. The soil was warm, wet, alive. It pulled her down slowly, reverently, like a cradle returning to the womb. Above her, the villagers closed the ring of roots, and all light vanished. She could not move, could not scream, but she could feel. Beneath her back, other bodies, not bones, not corpses, bodies, soft, breathing, still alive. And beside her, a hand touched hers, fingers tangled with hers, then another and another. And all around her she heard 1,000 breaths, none of them hers. And in the center of the dark, a voice. You are home. They say the dead rest beneath sacred trees, but the Mourning Soul Tree does not offer rest. It offers remembrance, and those it remembers never truly die. There was no time in the soil, only breath. Yunling floated between consciousness and something older. Not sleep, not death, but root-deep stillness, as if the tree had pressed its palm against her chest and slowed her heart to match its own. She couldn't move. Her limbs were bound not just by silk, but by something living. Roots had curled around her wrists, ankles, throat, not tight enough to kill, just enough to keep her still. And all around her, warmth, bodies, soft, alive, other daughters. She could feel them, not just as shapes in the dark, but as echoes, grief buried in silk, breath caught in lungs that no longer remembered speaking. One beside her wept silently. Another whispered something over and over. I am not her. I am not her. I am not her. Yunling tried to speak, but her mouth was full of soil. It tasted of salt and blood and memory. Time passed or folded. At some point the tree began to speak, not in words, in pulses, in visions, flashes behind her closed eyes. A woman wrapped in red, screaming without sound as villagers placed stones over her grave. A newborn handed over like an offering, her umbilical cord still wet. A mother watching from the edge of the mist, silent as her child is lowered into the roots. Then, her mother, kneeling beside the Mourning Soul Tree, pressing her hand to the trunk and whispering, "Take her instead." Yunling jerked awake, but she hadn't moved. She realized then she was no longer breathing air. She was breathing the tree. Every inhale was laced with ash, incense, old blood, and fog that had never touched the sky. She opened her eyes. Darkness shifted. The tree had made a room around her. Walls of root and bark pulsed gently. Faces pressed from within the wood, some weeping, some smiling, some with eyes stitched shut. She wasn't in a grave. She was in a womb, and it was still growing. A shape moved beside her. She turned her head barely and saw a figure half submerged in roots. Her face was pale, her eyes open wide, blood trailing from the corners. Her mouth stitched with thread so deep it disappeared into her skin. But Yunling recognized her. It was the first daughter, the one buried during the famine, the one who was never supposed to wake. Now, she was awake and watching. The girl spoke without opening her mouth. The words bloomed inside Yunling's skull like flowers made of pain. They buried me for balance. They kept me for silence. But they forgot that roots do not forget, and neither do I. Yunling tried to pull away. The roots pulled tighter. You are not the first to scream, but you will be the last. Unless... The first daughter leaned closer. Their foreheads nearly touched. Unless you take my place. Yunling's thoughts spun. What did that mean? How could she escape? And then she heard it, above them, a rumbling. Not thunder, footsteps. The village was gathering again, preparing another rite. She realized with horror what was happening. The tree wasn't done. It wanted more daughters, more silence, more blood, because she had not yet been accepted. "I don't want this," she whispered into the dark. "I don't belong here." The first daughter cocked her head. "Neither did I." She opened her stitched mouth with a slow, awful tear of flesh, and from her throat a river of roots poured out, slithering across the chamber, wrapping around Yunling's waist. One root pierced her chest, not to kill, but to plant her, to turn her into part of the tree. Yunling screamed, and this time it echoed. The tree shook, the bark cracked, the other daughter stirred. The silence shattered. And then above, light. A crack in the roots. Just a sliver, but enough. Enough for her to remember her name, to remember her mother's betrayal, and enough to know, if she didn't burn this tree from the inside, it would outlive them all. Some are buried in soil. Others are buried in silence. But the deepest graves are made of memory. Yunling drifted, not upward, not downward, but inward, into something that felt older than pain and wider than the world. She no longer felt her body, only presence, not just her own, many. The darkness around her shifted, not black, but crimson, like the space behind closed eyelids in sunlight. Shapes emerged, dozens, then hundreds of women, suspended in air as if underwater, their robes drifting like drowned silk. Each one was wrapped in the funeral red, each one bound by thread and sorrow. And each one turned toward her when she arrived. No mouths opened, no words were spoken, but Yunling heard them all. She comes. Another one, the promised child. Not the first, not the last. She floated past them. Some wept without sound. Some laughed with hollow, broken eyes. One reached out as Yunling passed, placing a cold palm against her cheek. Her touch sparked a vision. A girl, perhaps 15, dragged from her home by her own mother, wrapped, bound, buried. Her name? Shuemei. Yunling whispered it before she even knew it. The girl smiled, sadly, and sank back into the dark. Another passed, then another, each with a name, each with a memory, each with a story cut off at the root. The chamber was endless, but its center pulsed like a heart. Yunling was pulled toward it. There, at the core, stood a great altar made of woven branches, bone, and silk, glowing softly from within. Around it circled 7 daughters, older than the rest. Their robes were richer, their threads darker, their eyes completely white. They were the first line, the original bearers of the oath. And when Yunling reached them, they opened their mouths as one. "We are what was given. We are what was kept. We are what was never forgiven." Their voices were wind and thunder, a sound that rippled through the realm like a storm through roots. "You are her blood, the one who fled, the one who promised the next." Yunling fell to her knees. "I didn't ask for this." We didn't either, but we are still here. I'm not like her. You are exactly like her. That's why the tree remembers. Yunling looked around at the countless daughters suspended in silence, all offered, all taken. How do I stop it? The eldest of the seven stepped forward. Her mouth had no lips. Her voice was a tremble in Yunling's chest. You must break the oath. I tried. I ran. I fought. I refused. No, you must burn it. Burn what? Your name. The altar in the center of the realm pulsed again. From within its tangled frame, a single scroll drifted forward, rolled tight, sealed with red wax, and vibrating with heat. Her name was inside, Lu Yunling, written in blood, promised, signed, owed. She reached for it, but the air turned thick, and the realm began to fight her. The daughters stirred, their bodies trembling. Some screamed, others wailed in silence. Roots slithered from the walls, grasping at her arms. The tree was waking fully now. It knew what she was trying to do. It would not let her go easily. She grabbed the scroll. The wax hissed. The realm howled. She tries to unname herself. She denies the pact. She will burn us all. Yunling held the scroll to her chest and whispered, "Then let it burn." Flame erupted from her palms, not fire from matches, but fire from memory. Every betrayal, every scream, every name buried before it was lived. The scroll ignited. The tree screamed. The daughters wept, and the realm began to collapse. The altar shattered. The silk tore. The roots recoiled. And one by one, the daughters began to rise, their bodies lifting out of the soil, no longer buried, no longer bound. Yunling heard their voices for the first time, clear, strong, full of grief and release. "Thank you. We remember now. We are free." But the cost had not yet been paid. From the center of the broken realm, the first daughter rose, not free, not grateful, but vengeful. Her eyes burned red. Her voice was thunder. "You were mine." Yunling turned. The world around her cracked like glass. And the final judgment had begun. The tree remembers names, but it was her voice that taught it how to curse. The roots collapsed behind her. The altar had burned. The daughters had risen, and Yunling stood alone in a realm that was crumbling from within. But the center held. One thing remained untouched by fire, untouched by light. Her, the first daughter, the one who was offered before the curse had a name. She stepped forward slowly, her body made of silk and ash. Her eyes bled light. Her breath moved the roots. Her voice was not a voice. It was a flood. "You burned my name." Yunling stood firm. It had to end. You ended nothing. You disturbed the pact. You are the pact. I was the silence they needed, and the scream they buried. Around them, the world shook. The other daughters had vanished, swallowed back into memory or freed into oblivion. Yunling and the first daughter remained, two ends of the same wound. The tree trembled above them, roots writhing like a dying beast. The bark split open in a long, groaning scar. Blood poured down its trunk, slow and endless. "Why did you stay?" Yunling asked. The first daughter blinked. Her eyes glowed like coal behind fog. "Because no one came back for me." Yunling felt her throat tighten. "You kept the others buried." "I held them so they wouldn't forget what it cost to be abandoned." "You turned into the curse. I became the memory." "Then let go." "No." The first daughter raised her arms. The earth screamed, and from the red soil around them, bodies rose, not spirits, but husks made of bark and silk and blood-soaked memory, the daughters reborn in grief. Twisted, sharp, beautiful, terrible. They circled Yunling, but they did not strike. They waited, watched, like roots waiting for a crack. This tree must stand as long as there are mothers who betray, as long as daughters are born to be buried. I will remain. You don't have to. Then show me another way. Silence. Yunling stepped closer. She reached for the first daughter's hand, and for a moment, the roots paused. The soil stilled. The tree listened. Yunling whispered, "Let me take your place." The first daughter stared. "You would bury yourself?" "Yes." "You would become the silence?" "No." She pulled the comb from her pocket, the bone now scorched, split from flame. She drove the comb into the first daughter's chest, not in violence, in release. The bone shattered on impact. The root screamed, the husks fell apart, and the first daughter gasped, not in pain, but in relief. Her form began to unravel, silk unwinding, flesh dissolving into petals, into mist, into memory, and she whispered as she vanished, "Thank you for remembering me." The realm cracked open. Light poured through. Above, the Mourning Soul Tree groaned like a collapsing cathedral. Its roots split, its blood turned to smoke, its leaves fell, not in decay, but in surrender. And Yunling rose, through the roots, through the soil, through the centuries of grief. She emerged at the base of the tree, hands trembling, mouth bleeding, alive. The villagers stood frozen around the altar, their robes soaked, their masks fallen. Elder Hu collapsed to his knees. Auntie Rong stepped forward, tears streaking her face. "You broke it!" "No," Yunling said softly. "I released her." Behind them, the Mourning Soul Tree cracked down the center, split, hollow. Inside, there was no rot, no bones, only light, and the final breath of a name that had been buried too long. Some stories end in silence, others end in flame, but the ones that matter end in both. The Mourning Soul Tree was dying. It did not fall. It opened, split clean down its trunk like a heart cleaved in confession. Light spilled from within, not bright, but dull and soft, like the glow behind closed eyes, the kind of light you see just before sleep or just after death. Yunling stood before it, silk torn, body shaking. Inside the hollow tree, she saw everything. Bones, yes, but not twisted, laid with care. A bed of offerings, silk folded like wings, hair braided in threads of gold and black, masks made of paper, their painted mouths stitched shut. At the very center, wrapped in ribbons and silence, lay a small bundle, unmoving, untouched by time. The first body, still child-sized, still whole, still waiting. Yunling stepped inside the tree. The villagers gasped behind her. Some knelt, some wept, but none followed. The bark did not resist her. The roots did not rise. She was no longer intruder, but part of it. The tree let her in. She knelt beside the bundle. Her fingers trembled as she touched the silk. The fabric fell away. Beneath it was a girl's skeleton, perfectly preserved, her mouth still sewn shut. But it wasn't bone that stopped Yunling's breath. It was the face carved into the wood behind her. A girl's face, eyes wide, silent scream. Etched into the trunk like a memory too deep to rot. She reached up and touched the carving, and the roots responded. The whole tree shuddered, as if breathing for the first time in centuries. Yunling closed her eyes and whispered, "You are not forgotten." A wind rose from within the hollow. It pushed outward, not violent, cleansing. The branches groaned. Leaves fell like red snow. The villagers outside covered their faces, but Yunling did not move. The wind passed through her and took the screams with it. Outside, the fog thickened, but it did not feel cold. It felt clean. Auntie Rong knelt at the base of the tree, her forehead pressed to the roots. Elder Hu wept openly, red thread falling from his lips, and one by one the villagers removed their masks. Faces once frozen by fear, now softened in grief. Not terror, not devotion, just grief. The fire began in the branches. It did not come from the villagers or from Yunling. The tree set itself alight. A quiet fire. No crackling, no roar, just a slow burning, like pages turning into smoke. The leaves turned gold, then to ash. The roots curled inward. The trunk collapsed without sound. The Mourning Soul Tree, the oldest curse in the valley, was gone. Yunling watched it fall. She did not cry. Not yet. She stood in the center of the ashes, hands open, dress stained in memory. Then finally, she whispered, "She's free now." And the forest, what was left of it, sighed in response. That night, Yunling stayed in the village, not in her mother's house, but in the shrine at the edge of the fields, the place where no one had dared to light incense in decades. She swept the floor, cleaned the altar, lit a single candle. She placed no mask upon her face, no silk on her shoulders, only the broken comb, burned, splintered. She set it on the altar and let it stay. The fog returned just before dawn, but it didn't feel like a warning anymore. It felt like a veil, a soft curtain drawn across an old stage after the final scene has played. And in that quiet, Yunling slept, for the first time in years, without dreaming of roots. The tree is gone, but mourning is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet enough to last forever. Years passed, the fog thinned, the earth healed, but no one rebuilt where the Mourning Soul Tree had once stood. The villagers planted nothing there. No shrine, no stone, not even a flower, just emptiness. Like a space left at the dinner table for someone who would never return. Tourists came sometimes, foreigners with cameras, writers with notebooks. They heard the rumors about a cursed tree, a vanishing village, a girl buried alive. But they never stayed long. Their compasses spun in circles, their phones drained for no reason. And the fog, though thinner now, always found them. When asked about it, the locals would only say, "She stopped it, but it's still watching." No one said her name aloud. Yunling. Not out of fear, but out of reverence. She had not died, but she had not remained either. She was last seen walking the stone path out of the valley, barefoot, hair loose, a burned comb in her pocket. No one stopped her. No one followed, and the fog swallowed her gently. Some say she went to the city, became a writer, or a teacher, or something small. Others say she still walks the forests in the early morning, pressing her ear to the trunks of ancient trees, listening for breath beneath the bark. There's even a tale of an old woman seen tending to the shrine on the hill, always alone, always silent, who leaves bundles of red thread tied to the branches of saplings. When children ask her who they're for, she simply replies, "For the ones who were promised." But the truth? No one knows. Because Yunling never told her story. She lived it, then let it go. The village remains smaller now, but gentler. No more masks, no more oaths. The girls born there grow up hearing the story of the Mourning Soul Tree, but it's told not as warning nor curse, but as a reminder of silence, of sorrow, and the strength it takes to break the roots binding your name to someone else's sin. There is one place the children do not play, a patch of soft earth untouched by feet or shovels at the edge of the old square. They call it the breathing ground. They say if you stand there long enough, you can hear a heartbeat, faint, gentle, not angry, just watching, just waiting. Sometimes on the coldest nights, red flowers bloom there, only for an hour, only under the full moon. No one dares pick them. They're not for the living. They're for the ones who left, and the ones who were never supposed to stay. Yunling's story is gone now, buried like all the others. But the wind still carries her name when it moves through the trees. Not in anger, not in mourning, but in memory. And memory, like roots, never truly dies.